Category management is the standard process used by procurement professionals across most business sectors. It is the process taught at Procurement School. This systematic approach is far less likely to be undermined by great personal relationships with the customer, so relationship selling as a method has become less effective than it used to be. Suppliers that most ably deal with professional buyers using category management are those that engage with this process as early as possible. The role of procurement is to capture value from the supply chain, its network or ecosystem. Some years ago, the primary method of achieving this was via the individual competence of professional buyers in respect of negotiation. A competent negotiator would more often than not secure better deals than a less competent one. It was the age of win-lose or zero-sum negotiating. And the game, as much as we could call it a game, was about whether each buyer was able to out-negotiate their respective supplier counterpart in sales. But really, it was a haphazard approach to procurement, despite the outstanding ability of many professionals who could demonstrate that negotiating competence. Procurement was becoming more complex and more important as spend percentages rose and outsourcing became fashionable. They developed an idea of best practice in procurement, and practitioners began informally benchmarking their practice with others in their own and other sectors. What emerged was the practice of strategic sourcing, a new, more systematic approach to investigating the supply market, negotiating and selecting suppliers, and many organizations across a wide range of sectors adopted strategic sourcing as their method. As this practice matured, it added the post-contract activities of contract management, performance management, and supplier relationship management, morphing into an end-to-end process, what we now know as category management. Let me explain what procurement means when practitioners refer to a category. You will recall this graphic from an earlier video in this series. It shows the typical company where around 70% of its revenues are spent in the supply chain. Procurement separates the spend into direct materials, that which goes into the company's end products, and indirect materials and services, those that are required to run business operations. You'll see some examples shortly. Imagine a passenger airplane manufacturer. Obviously, the financial numbers are far greater than in the example I've been using so far, but the principles are the same. There will be some split between direct and indirect, depending on the type of business it could be. 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, or some other combination. But sticking with the airplane manufacturer example, directs are segmented into a range of different categories. Only a few are represented here, and the number could run into the dozens. Here we see engines, interiors, flight controls, undercarriage, and the airframe itself. But this segmentation is too imprecise, and so procurement segments to the next level. We now see many more categories, each of which will have a specialist category manager. These are the professional buyers, and they'll be responsible for ensuring best value for money is achieved. Category segmentation can, and often does, go to a greater level of granularity into subcategories and then into even subcategories. And the story is the same for indirects. Again, specialists are deployed to manage their portion of the procurement spend. This segmentation activity is called category planning and is usually refreshed every financial year when savings opportunities are sought as part of the budgeting process. And savings targets will be agreed between the CFO and the CPO and procurement's category managers. Team selection is also part of this process, as some categories will require a team effort to ensure progress. Stakeholders from other business functions will be part of those teams. Category planning forms the base activity of the category management process and is essentially a prioritization activity for the Chief Procurement Officer. From this, he or she can allocate resources to category projects across the procurement team. From this point, the category management process is repeated for each spend category subject to review. It's worth adding that not every category will be reviewed annually, as some will have contracts in place covering multiple years, or they're low value and so not so much of a priority. Phase 1 of the process is about determining business requirements, what the company hopes to get from the category. Could be savings targets, regulatory requirements, project milestones, the required volumes, etc. The category manager will need to secure agreement on these. Some will be standard procurement policy, others specific to the category or project, before embarking on Phase 2, which is supply market analysis. This is about determining what is happening in the specific business sector using Porter's 5 forces analysis to understand how much competition exists between suppliers and macro issues around politics, economics, the environment, government regulation, etc. Once the supply market is well understood, the category manager will begin to consider sourcing options. How many suppliers does the company wish to work with, and whether local, regional or global suppliers are preferred. In this phase, there are tools such as portfolio analysis, power analysis and make versus buy analysis, each of which will deepen the category manager's insight and begin to guide their sourcing and relationship management strategies. Phase 4 is about tendering and market testing to get initial responses in from suppliers that have been invited to participate. This will require the development of bid evaluation criteria and an agreed process for reaching a collective decision on which suppliers are selected for further negotiation. Phase 5 is about pursuing the optimum commercial deal through that negotiation with those preferred bidders, before the contract or contracts are awarded to the winning supplier or suppliers. The category manager now enters the post-contract phase of the process, with Phase 6 focusing on ensuring the contracts are in place, the administration around the contract is well managed, and that internal stakeholders comply with what has been agreed. Phase 7 is about assuring performance to contract and continuous improvement of value. I'll say more about this later in the series. But for now, it's worth stating that professional buyers have high expectations of their ability to improve deals even after the contracts have been signed. Research has suggested that today's customer is typically around 65% through this category management process before the first face-to-face contact takes place. More salespeople engage with the category management process at Phase 4, but they should be targeting Phase 1, especially so if they are the incumbent supplier. This makes it doubly difficult for a new supplier salesperson to engage procurement early enough to in any way influence the specification. Indeed, if first contact is at Phase 4, then depending on the category and the competition, then the chances of successfully winning the contract is very low indeed. Some say less than 1% probability. The category management approach by procurement has been highly successful and is deployed widely. It can be incredibly challenging for salespeople to feel any sense of control during the process, but it represents reality when it comes to today's job of sales. Dealing with that uncertainty has become a fact of life. But there are things the salesperson can do. Do some research to find out how your customer executes its procurement activity. Many CPOs are open about their category management process. And then understand how each customer defines the category your company serves. If, for example, you're a facilities management company, what does each key customer have within scope for that category? It may be different. And review the customer's contract renewal timetable, at least as far as you're able to. You don't want to receive an invitation to tender when you're the incumbent supplier, at least if it's a surprise. And do everything to engage with the category management process as early as possible. Plan how you will get ahead of your competition by engaging with the customer earlier in the process and work to influence the customer's business requirements. We will return to this process and the key procurement tools within it later in this series.